Welcome back to Ensemble Sewing Studio. Today I want to show you my projector setup. If you're interested in using PDF files and you don't want to print out pages and pages of the pattern pieces and then cut and paste them all together, getting a projector is a great way to go about the process. And the technology is not as overwhelming to learn as you might expect. I became interested in projector files about a year and a half ago, and I knew nothing about what I needed to get, what I needed to do to go about the process. So I got on Google, read a bunch of blog posts from other crafters and sewists, and just began taking all of that information in. I joined a Facebook group called Projectors for Sewing. It's a private group, and there is a ton of information within that group about the types of projectors, types of cables, types of setups. Other people share their own setups, and you'll get a great idea of what your preference might be. For me, I decided to get an ultra short throw projector because I can put this up and take this down and get it out of my way. I don't have a lot of space. I live in an apartment. I can't mount hardware on the ceiling. And this has really been a great investment for me. I have the Epson Brightlink 485 WI, and I purchased it off of eBay. It's a used refurbished projector, and the eBay seller's name is M.O. Surplus. He is a member of the Projectors for Sewing group and is highly recommended. I paid $130 for this projector about a year ago, July of 2024. Like I said, I didn't know anything about projector sewing, how to set this up. So I plugged it in when I got it in July, made sure that it turned on and it worked. And then I promptly stuffed it under my sewing table, where it sat for a few more months. So it was September 2024, exactly a year ago, that I decided on Labor Day weekend that I was going to figure out how to set the projector up and get it going and cut out my first pattern. I thought this was going to take me all weekend long, but in fact, it really just took me one morning to get it all up and running. So I'm going to show you what I have and what my process is in cutting out a projector file for sewing patterns. With a short throw projector, your projector sits near your mat. You just need to prop it up on something. I am just using a plastic storage box here. My intention was to hook the projector up to my Chromebook, and I figured that I had a cable around here somewhere that would work for this. And I went in the garage and I dug through boxes of old cables there, and I don't know why I still have them. They're going to have to go. And nothing worked. So then I went over to Best Buy and told the sales associate what I had planned to do. And he recommended that I get the HDMI cable. So I have a 4-foot HDMI cable and a lightning adapter. Once I have my projector set up on my little plastic box, I simply plug the lightning adapter into my iPad. I go to my settings. I make sure that I turn my display settings so that my screen won't shut off. So I set it on never. And then I have a little post-it note that I make sure I set next to my iPad so that when I'm all done, I remember to go back and change my display settings. My projector comes with a little remote control. So I've hit the button to turn it on. And it just takes a couple of seconds to warm up. Then the projector, as you might be able to see, is projecting onto the mat. I'm going to turn the light off in a second and show you calibration, but before we get there, I want to show you the app that I use. It's called Pattern Projector. If you go to patternprojector.com, you'll also find a lot of great resources there. And I have downloaded the app on my iPad. And now, as you can see, or maybe you can't see at this point, I now have a grid displayed on my mat. The mat that I use to cut out my fabric patterns on is a 24 by 36 inch mat, and you can enter different dimensions into the Pattern Projector app. And this is what it looks like to give you an idea. I am going to turn the light off and move my camera around so that you can take a better look at what's on my screen here. When you open up the Pattern Projector application, you'll see this grid, all these green lines. And like I said, I have set the width and the height for my mat in the application. So you can see that actually, they're lined up pretty well right now because I just cut out a pattern yesterday. But usually after moving your projector and setting it back up, you're going to have to recalibrate. So usually when I set it back up, I might find that my dimensions look something like this. They're just kind of all over the place. So to recalibrate, I simply use my Apple Pencil and move each corner of the grid on the screen to meet the corners on my mat. So I just get somewhere close, like right about here. Well, that's not even close. But then I use my up and down arrows to get the green line to match up exactly to my mat. This just takes a few minutes. I don't find it so bothersome. If you have a projector that you mount on your ceiling, you won't have to recalibrate every time you go to use your projector. But this doesn't bother me at all. I'd rather just get my projector out of the way when I'm not using it. So now I have the top right corner lined up. I'm going to go to the bottom right corner. Kind of figure out where it is. That's pretty close. And then use my arrows to adjust the line. Bottom left corner. I'm going to use my arrows and pull that back down. Looks like it needs to go down a little bit more. And because it's so far away from where I'm sitting, I generally have to go over there and take a look. It's quite far off the left line. And I'm going to raise it up a little bit in that corner. Maybe go back down a little bit. And then the upper left corner. So I'm using a 6-foot folding table, and my table has supports on the ends and in the center underneath, but it dips just a little bit. As you can see, things kind of moving here and my lines moving. So I keep that in mind. I just line my lines up the best I can from end to end and in the corners. I don't worry too much about them being slightly off in the middle here where the table dips. Some people place paper or cardboard underneath their mat, but I don't find that it makes any difference in my cutting, the accuracy of my cutting. So I'm pretty happy with the way things are lined up. I think this corner I might lower the grid just a little bit. Yeah, I feel better about that. Okay, I'm happy with the way that my grid is lined up now. So I'm going to hit the project button, choose a file. I'm just going to choose any file just to show you. I just made the Adria top, so I'm going to open that one up. Okay, here is another way that you can check the accuracy of your grid as well. Once you hit the pattern project file, I mean, you can change how you see things on the mat, I believe, but I have it set so that I can see this 11 by 8.5 inch box. And then I can just place a piece of paper over that section to make sure that my grid is set up correctly. So here it is. I'm happy with the way it's set up. As I'm moving my pieces around the screen, I do keep an eye on the outside edges, because for some reason my lines do tend to creep, and then I simply go back into the calibration mode and adjust any areas in the corners where the line has creeped. I don't know why that happens. I think it has something to do with my iPad, and as I'm using the up and down buttons to move my pattern pieces around, I don't know if it just gets a little confused whether I'm in projection mode or calibration mode. So I can't explain that. I haven't learned that yet. Let me take you a bit closer to my screen. So one thing I like about pattern projection is that there are layers in the pattern, and you can choose your size. I have size 8 chosen for the Adria top, which is a seamwork pattern that I mentioned I just made. And I like to have the piece information on and the test square on. Then you can just, after a few seconds, that menu will just move out of your way. So then you're thinking, well, I can't see my pattern pieces at all. And we can use our up-down arrows to move them around. I also like to have a thicker line for the pattern pieces, so I will usually change that to 1 pixel or possibly sometimes 2. That'll make your pattern piece lines darker when you're cutting out, because to see your pattern pieces, a lot of times you'll have to dim the lights in your room. Okay, let me move these pattern pieces over onto the screen so that you can see what it looks like. Oh, I think I've opened up the wrong file here. So I am going to go back. Instead of the projector file, I opened up a different form of that file. So I'm going to choose a different one. I am going to choose what? The meadow top. Okay. This is better. You can see here this is a sleeve. I'm going to go back to the side menu. You can see that I have size 6 checked there. I also have the piece information checked so that I can see that. the thickness of the lines, I have set on 0 and you can see them pretty well, but I'm going to change it to 1 pixel. And then because I want my grain lines to be parallel with the longest edge on my mat, I am going to change the direction of the pattern piece. So now you can see the sleeve. And you can move that piece around on your mat with the up and down arrow buttons. If you have a piece that needs to go up against the fold line of your fabric, oh, I can tell this one has a center line that's coming up. So here's a front pattern piece to a top. And you're probably wondering, well, what do you do now? It looks like that pattern piece is going off the mat. You can lay your fabric out in a single layer. Well, now I have it all on the mat. But if you have, you can cut your pattern piece out in a single layer, as you can see here. Or we have the center fold line. You can double your fabric and line your fabric up along the fold line, which is usually what I do. I want to give you an idea of what this is going to look like with the fabric laid down and what my technique is in cutting out so that my fabric doesn't move as I'm cutting. So let's pretend that this is just black cotton woven fabric. It's actually black stretch denim, and I'm not actually making this top. But you can see there's kind of wrinkles in the fabric. But I'm going to lay it flat here, line it up to this fold line on this pattern piece, and then I use a number of objects to help flatten my fabric while I cut. I have washers. A lot of sewists go to the hardware store and buy these big heavy washers, and these are great for holding down your pattern pieces. I put as many of them down as I need. And then as you can see on the fold line here, it kind of moves up a little bit, so I may even move the washer over to that edge just to get it flat and precise. And that looks good. I also have smaller washers that I'll use for smaller spaces. It helps to use a lot. And if you find that you have a fabric that is kind of bubbling up along the edge, then you can just put more weights on your fabric around the pattern piece. Then I generally use my rotary cutter and cut out the pattern piece. I find that scissors might be more of a challenge because you're having to lift your fabric up, and that might make the line a little harder to see as you're cutting. So I use the rotary cutter, and then I use my scissors for any little bits that the rotary cutter misses. One of the mistakes that I made early on as I was learning how to use projector files was that I forgot to mark my notches and lines and circles as I was cutting out my pieces. So make sure that you don't forget to do that. I have found that I really have a preference for projector files over tissue paper file patterns because I don't have to worry about storing patterns, And if I decide to make a different size in a garment, I can easily go back into the Pattern Projector app and change the size. For instance, I made a ruby vest in the spring in a size 8, and now I want to make a larger size in a 10 for the cooler months because I want to wear the vest as more of an outer piece. And that's something you can do easily with the Projector file. When you have a tissue paper pattern, you end up cutting away the larger sizes, and then you're just going to have to guess if you want to make a larger garment from that pattern. If you use a projector for sewing, I'm interested in knowing what your own setup is. Feel free to leave a comment and let me know what works for you. If you have questions about projectors and projector sewing, also feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to answer your questions. I'm by no means an expert, but I can probably point you in the right direction to find the answers. Once again, thanks for being here. I really appreciate your support.